Thanks, Brian. Thanks for inviting me to spend the evening with you. It's a pleasure to be back in Toronto. Yesterday, for those of you who didn't notice, was the start of spring. For those of us in Ottawa, we still don't understand that because Ottawa tonight is getting somewhere around another 10 centimeters of snow. So it's lovely to be in Toronto. So thank you. Let me stay. If you're looking to hire somebody, please give me a call. Happy to do it. And thank you to RBC for the event tonight, for the facilities. RBC I'm particularly fond of because RBC is one of our founding members, and they're on our board of directors. So thank you very much. Interesting that this is the 1-year anniversary of the cyber threat and risk. Really interested in the first item that was on the list there, and that's the community and collaboration piece, because essentially that's what the CCTX is, so I'm really excited, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But what's really interesting is a move next year to start to go into, or this coming year for you, start to go into the small and medium-sized companies, and I'll talk a little bit about that when I talk about the CCTX. So here we go. So what I'm going to do tonight is talk a little bit about the threats and then how that risk is actually playing out. Then talk a little bit about what some Canadian companies are doing to try to help one another to deal with both the risk and the threat side of it. This is a collection of some headlines over the last few months as companies get together to try to decide what does 2019 look like. And essentially it boils down to 3 blocks: criminals, supply chain, and the cloud. And whether we can argue with any one of these, are they exact or are they right on? Maybe I'll say yes or no, but by and large, all of the future forecasters are saying it's going to be worse. It's not going to get better in the short term, whether that be more attacks on supply chain, whether that's now actually going after attacks into the cloud. And one of the interesting things of going after the cloud, we're now starting to see attackers going in after individuals within the cloud, new trend that's coming along. The underground is going to start to consolidate. They're going to start to see things like stronger malware as a service and as a family of service coming through, so they're going to be much better at it. Criminal invasion techniques are really prospering from the advances in technology. They're really early adopters in artificial intelligence. There's going to be some interesting events over the next few months. We're just starting to see the beginning of them starting to apply AI to some of their collection and then the use of the information they're collecting. And the cyber market economy, one of the interesting things is the attackers are getting better at collaborating. And I say we've got to be as good, and I'd like to think we're better than what they are. So let's talk a little bit about what's actually going on. So this is a collection of headlines we put out a weekly summary of what's gone on. So this is just some headlines from a variety of publications that we thought might be of interest to some of our members. You don't need to read through it, just to say that that's 1 week snapshot of what we're actually seeing that's coming in that might have an interest to Canadian companies. But there's a lot of stuff that we don't even bother putting up. And some of these you'll be familiar with, and the list can go on. We could make this page completely red and go into page 2, page 3 as we go through. The bottom line is, as I mentioned, it's continuing to get not pleasant for a while. Unless you think that that's only happening to other countries, rest assured, Canada can consider ourselves amongst the best in the world, and that also means we're subject to attack the same as everyone else, whether that be from hospitals being shut down because of cyber attacks, whether you're seeing St. John's. What I liked was the attack into the parking system and how that then replayed back through their system. Towns are now being shut down. Small towns in Ontario, small town in Quebec, just partway between Quebec City and Montreal, paid off $30,000 last year to do it. Universities are being hit. Coast Capital Savings, that's a small, like a credit union on the west coast of, in the west coast of British Columbia. So it's going across and it's hitting all of them. I mean, yesterday. So what do we see yesterday? A Canadian medical marijuana referral agency out of Calgary had to go out and notify its clients that its database had been hacked into. And the one that really bothers me is yesterday the BC Alcohol Distribution Centre was affected with a ransomware attack, and they were shut down for a week. They didn't pay the ransom, but they were shut down for a week. Now that's really bad. I mean, they're starting to shut down the supply of beer. You technical people got to get out there and start doing something about that. I'm joking, but because the problem is that's real dollars to somebody. That's a company that's shut down for a week. And I'll give you a couple other examples of companies where we've talked to over the last while. So one of the things that's coming out of this is data has become the new currency. Attackers know that. They want to go after it. They don't necessarily want to steal it, What they want to do is deny you the ability to do it, or sometimes they actually may want to steal it, and we're getting into business disruption. I like this example of the ingenuity of attackers. It's a bit old. This is a couple of years ago that this occurred. How many of you have been to Las Vegas and seen the big aquariums that are in behind some of the check-in counters, and they're scattered around? They make beautiful dividers between the various parts of it. So some genius figured out that you can attack the thermostat that runs and keeps those big tanks at whatever temperature they're supposed to be. And because you want to, as a good corporation, you want to be able to control everything, you control that from the central operational part of your organization. So you attack into the thermostat, leads back up to the organization, and they were able to download all of the data of all the high rollers. So all of that casino's biggest, most lucrative customers walked out the door. So I don't know about you, but in most businesses, that's a serious problem. It's not the kind of thing you want to start doing. So this is just a good example of what I look at when you're starting to talk about the problems of, one, supply chain, and second, the Internet of Things, how we literally just start hooking everything together. So because we're trying to keep this a little lighter, let me give you some examples of sort of the ingenuity and what's going on the out there on the dark web, and as examples of what people are actually going after and attacking. So what I'm going to show you is a series of screenshots off a dark web site. So this is organized crime, buying and selling things. So this is this is a screenshot of someone that's come along and starting to sell access into a bank. And how did they do it? So this bank had a little digital display out in the lobby of a mall that said, mortgage rate today is dropped, come in and sign up. And like good corporations, you want to do that centrally so that all the banks, they all display the same percentage rate, so they control that in the way they do it. So somebody found out that that sign has got no cybersecurity on it. Cyber attackers are very opportunistic. They go through the easiest door. They don't need to come in and start knocking on the Department of Finance door. In this case, they knocked on the door of this little sign that's out in the lobby saying what's your interest rate for the day. So this is somebody selling, and I can't quite read the amount in it, but this is showing up there. If you're interested in buying it, you could buy access into it. This is another one. This is a particularly interesting shot. So this is somebody that's selling, that they've gone through and they've attacked the cameras that are mounted outside of an office building. And what they're trying to do is make it really simple for all of their employees coming in or people using the parking lot. Instead of having to pay every time you come in, they've got a camera there that reads your license plate. And when it comes in, it says, oh, license plate X, that's Bob Gordon, we'll charge him $5 to his account, and away he goes. So what they did is attack the camera. The camera leads back into the entire financial records of that company. Everything gets exposed because you've got a camera sitting out. So this is a screenshot of what they're selling to prove to their prospective buyers of this service. They're showing you this is what you're actually seeing. So this is what they've actually stolen down on the site. And so this is another interesting one going after, in this case, it's after a Century 21 office in New York City. So what they're selling is all of the information relating to a bunch of their customers. And this isn't meant as an eye test because the contents of it aren't interesting, and I actually can't read how many bitcoins that they're selling this out for. But what the interesting thing is, and some of you at the front may be able to see, this is all in Russian. A hint as to where this actually comes from and who's doing it. But this is business. This is criminal business. So what they do is they'll translate it for you. They'll translate it into a whole bunch of languages. So they want to be out there, like any good business, they will translate this into whatever language you want. So here it is in the English version. And here's someone that's selling something slightly different. So this is medical clients, or this is medical patients' information. They're selling off the medical records for 1,900 people, and about half of them have got social insurance numbers and a bunch of information relating to the employment, the activity, the medical of not only the patient, but also the spouse's patient. And I can't see, this one didn't have an amount on it. We only captured the one screen. It's just for information. But they'll also sell generic access into a corporation. So the other one was selling a specific database. In this instance, what we're doing is we're actually just selling you access into the entire corporation. So depending what your interests are, as a cyber criminal, you could go through and buy which one you want. But there's also people selling other kinds of things. So in this case, or buyers, in this case, what the buyer wants to do is they want to buy access into US trucking companies. So this is a full market that's going on for criminals or people working in that space. So these are live screenshots coming out of it. And when you start looking at the supply chain becomes critical because that becomes your weakest link into your organization. Everybody who touches your organization electronically is a prospective access into your corporation. Here's an example out of last year. You probably read in the press how the Americans were concerned about access into the American electrical grid by Russia. Literally, this is, as I say, walk through it. In this instance, what they did, so you've got the American electrical community is a massive organization. They spend a lot of money on security. In this case, what they did is they attacked a 15-person little construction company out in Oregon that was providing some services into a gigantic electricity corporation. And that's how they got into the system. And once they got in the system, that allowed them to move laterally across because you then become trusted inside the network. And away they went. And it doesn't matter, I've picked on a couple of businesses there. It doesn't matter what business you're in. So if you think of modern buildings, literally they are just massive industrial control systems. It runs everything from the sprinkler systems, the camera systems, the elevators, the heating, you name it. There's piles of vending machines, thermostats, parking garage. All of those things are all subject to being attacked. So when you start to secure a building, you've got to start thinking about every one of those devices, because every one of those devices connects back into the corporation. And I was meeting recently with the CEOs from a number of Canada's biggest building owners, and they've got three problems. One is they've got a lot of data that's worthwhile stealing just in and of themselves. Second, they've got a lot of tenants in those buildings that have got lousy security, and every one of those tenants are plugging back into one of these systems going through. And at the same time, you've got tenants that are saying, hey, well, I've got a bank in here, and I'm spending a lot of money on cybersecurity. I'm now vulnerable because of you, building owner, what your security is. It's becoming a huge problem. It's something that they're just starting to address now. But it's a big challenge for them going through. And it doesn't, as I say, it doesn't matter what industry you're looking at. In the trucking industry. So this is now rated, so this was coming out last year. Cyber attacks are now rated as the third largest problem for the trucking industry. I was down in Moncton a couple of months ago talking to a group of trucking companies, and there was one company that was going to be there. They couldn't. For the last 2 weeks, they've been shut down. They had a $150,000 ransom attack on their system, which they cannot pay, and they're trying to decide, are they going to be able to stay in business? So these are real victims and real problems, and it's literally going across the sector. So it's no wonder when you look at Canada, the Alliance Risk Barometer, so Alliance is the big international risk consortium, sitting down and looking at the two top risks the Canadian companies are going to face this year. The first one is business interruption, the whole supply chain, because if your supply chain goes down, you're down. Basically, you're not doing it. So if your trucking company goes down, so if they don't know that you actually needed that product today, or that you gave it to them, they now haven't got the faintest idea where you actually want it delivered. We're all dependent on it. So that's the first. And the second are cyber incidents. So this is affecting all companies. When you start to get into saying, okay, what does this start to mean? What's happening about this? There's some things that are happening. We're getting a little better at it. So the dwell time is starting to go down. Now, a lot of people will debate whether it's last year, whether it's down to 191 days or something less than that. It really doesn't matter. What it means is they weren't in there just yesterday. And whether it's a week, 2 weeks, 3 months, the attackers have been inside your system for a long time. They're doing reconnaissance, they're exfiltrating data, they're digging deeper and deeper into your system. And quite often for some of them, they know your system better than you do. They've been in there for so long, and they're trying to hide going through it. And it's also we're getting better at how long it actually takes to deal with it. Now, one of the interesting things out of that, when you start to look at sort of what's trying to drive that down and why do we want to do it, you want to keep the attacker out of your system and get them out as fast as you can. You want to make them have to spend more time and more resources to come up with new systems to be able to attack you. You don't want them sitting back and using that same old attack that's in there. So how do you make it more expensive for them? And that's by driving that dwell time down. And one of the things that people are saying, are attributing to the diminishing in that, is actually engaging in threat intelligence sharing platforms as a way to try to do that. It's actually having a demonstrable impact. So why do you want to get into information sharing, threat information sharing? There's a bunch of reasons, but I think these are four of them that I've sort of come together in talking to companies. One is you're actually trying to leverage the knowledge of others to make the attacking more expensive. You want to push back, thinking back on that last slide, you want to make the cost for the attacker go up. And so everything you can be doing to achieve that goal works in your favor. Most companies, particularly big companies, have already got some information coming into them that they're making decisions on. The more information you get coming in, you start to enrich that to actually make it easier for you to start to make some of those tactical decisions you need looking after your defensive operations. And information sharing is cost effective. You don't need to do it all. You don't need to have any expertise. When you think of our organization, I've got a Russian linguist that's sitting there. Most law firms in this country practice law, or banks want to do investment sorts of things. Pick your company, that's what you do. You're not hiring Russian linguists to go through and troll through the dark web, just as one example. So you can start to capitalize on what everyone else is doing. And collaboration is also a way to help protect your clients and your supply chain. They could be your weakest link, so you're protecting yourself. But quite frankly, speaking as somebody who's trying to stay in business, you want your customers to stay in business. You don't want that small trucking company going out of business if they are either your supply chain or you're your customer. So what could you be doing collaboratively to try to help to ensure that they continue on in business and therefore you are? And threat intelligence sharing is considered the most effective way of dealing with that. So an interesting survey that was done by the Ponemon Institute a year ago, they came out in the study that they did, and they're a pretty good organization. On average, 39% of the attacks could have been thwarted were thwarted because organizations were engaged in the sharing of cyber threat information with their peers. And it's with that backdrop, the Canadian Cyber Threat Exchange was created. We're not-for-profit, multi-sector, all sizes of company, and we're a private sector initiative. We do two things. We share cyber threat information amongst ourselves as in a collaboration, in a data exchange, and we also do it through a collaboration center. We started out a couple of years ago with 9 companies. We've now got about 60 some odd. What we're doing is building a community, and I was struck by Brian's comments that that's what you're trying to do. That's essentially what we're doing. We build communities of trust where companies can get together, share best practices, your employees get together, share what's going on, both knowledge, and in the process, building up trust. Because before you can start sharing cyber threat information, you've got to have a trust relationship. Collaboration is what will lead you to that. And we do that through a variety of things, everything from we run seminars, we ran a full day event about a month ago. We run monthly seminars, webinars that we do. There's a whole range of things. We've got portals where we can do this. And on the threat exchange side of it, we get information from a couple of sources. One is from member companies. Some members provide us anonymized information, so there's no attribution back to who provided it. It can come in an electronic format, so things like Sticks and Taxi or come in by email. That comes into our center. We've got a group of analysts in there to produce a variety of reports, all of which is to try to get information out to make it actionable for employees. We also were the first organization to establish a formal relationship with the new Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. That's the group out of CSE. And we are also been working with the RCMP's National Cybercrime Coordination Unit as they get stood up. One of the interesting things, and my accolade goes out to the Canadian government and CSE. CSE is charged with protecting all of the federal government's networks. They have some proprietary equipment that's not commercially available, and they do a fabulous job of doing that. What they've spent several years figuring out is how can they electronically strip off all the things that make it classified such that they can get indicators of compromise out to the private sector. So what they're doing now is about 95% of all the indicators of compromise that they see coming at the federal government, within 30 minutes, that report will be out the door in a structured format to us, and we can pass that along to our member companies. There's no other country in the world that does that. A lot of countries do it, but they do it in a classified way, and there's a whole host of reasons why that isn't particularly effective. Canadian government is doing it, I think, the smart way, and we're the only country that's being able to do that. There was a report, I talked about some of the attacks that occurred against the energy sector. There was an attack occurred about a year ago now. CSE detected attack because there was a similar one coming in against part of the federal government. 8 minutes, detection, report out the door. In the US, it was 10 days. So I'm really proud of what the government's doing, and we're glad that we're able to part of that. Point of the exercise of what we're trying to do is how do I get something that's actionable out to companies of all sizes, big, large, or small? And with that, we've got time for a couple of questions.